2024, March 1st, Friday, 1 King 7. Solomon built his palace. Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished his entire house. He built the house of the priest of Lebanon. Its length was 100 cubits, and its breadth 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. And it was built on 4 rows of cedar pillars, with cedar beams on the pillars, and it was covered with cedar above the chambers that were on the 45 pillars, 15 in each row. There were window frames in 3 rows, and window opposite window in 3 tiers. All the doorways and windows had square frames, and window was opposite window in 3 tiers. And he made the whole of pillars. Its length was 50 cubits, and its breadth 30 cubits. There was a porch in front with pillars, and a canopy in front of them. And he made the whole of the throne where he was to pronounce judgment. Even the whole of judgment, it was finished with cedar from floor to rafters. His own house where he was to dwell in the outer court back of the hall was of like workmanship. Solomon also made a house like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had taken in marriage. All these were made of costly stones, cut according to measure, sewed with saws back and front, even from the foundation to the coping, and from the outside to the great court. The foundation was of costly stones, huge stones, stones of 8 and 10 cubits, and above were costly stones cut according to measurement, and cedar. The great court had 3 courses of cut stone all around, and the course of cedar beams. So had the inner court of the house of the Lord, and the vestibule of the house, the temple furnishings. And King Solomon sent and brought Hiram from Tyre. He was the son of widow of the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a worker in bronze, and he was full of wisdom, understanding, and skillful making any work in bronze. He came to King Solomon and did all his work. He cast 2 pillars of bronze. 18 cubits was the height of 1 pillar, and the line of 12 cubits measured its circumference. It was hollow, and its thickness was 4 fingers. The second pillar was the same. He also made 2 capitals of cast bronze to set on the tops of the pillars. The height of the one capital was 5 cubits, and the height of the other capital was 5 cubits. There were lattices of checker work with races of chain work for the capitals on the tops of the pillars, a lattice for the one capital and a lattice for the other capital. Likewise, he made pomegranates in 2 rows around the one lattice work to cover the capital that was on the top of the pillar, and he did the same with the other capital. Now the capitals that were on the tops of the pillars in the vestibule were of really work, 4 cubits. The capitals were on the 2 pillars, and also above the rounded projection which was beside the lattice work. There were 200 pomegranates in 2 rows all around, and so with the other capital. He set up the pillars at the vestibule of the temple. He set up the pillar on the south and called its name Jachin. And he set up the pillar on the north and called its name Boaz. And on the tops of the pillars was really work. Thus the work of the pillars was finished. Then he made the sea of cast metal. It was round, 10 cubits from brim to brim, and 5 cubits high, and the line of 30 cubits measured its circumference. Under its brim were gourds for 10 cubits, compassing the sea all around. The gourds were in 2 rows, cast with it when it was cast. It stood on 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea was set on them, and all their rear parts were inward. Its thickness was a handbreadth, and its brim was made like the brim of a cup. like the flower of a lily. It had 2,000 bases. He also made the 10 stands of bronze. Each stand was 4 cubits long, 4 cubits wide, and 3 cubits high. This was the construction of the stands. They had panels, and the panels were set in the frames, and on the panels that were set in the frames were rheons, oxen, and cherubim. On the frames, both above and below the rheons and oxen, there were recesses of a beveled work. Moreover, each stand had 4 bronze spheres and axles of bronze, and at the 4 corners were supports for a basin. The supports were cast with recesses at the side of each. Its opening was within a crown that projected upward 1 cubit. Its opening was round as a pedestal is made, a cubit and a half deep. At its opening there were calvings, and its petals were square, not round, and the 4 wheels were underneath the petals. The axles of the wheels were of one piece with the stand, and the height of a wheel was a cubit and a half. The wheels were made like a chariot wheel. Their axles, their rims, their spokes, their hubs were all cast. There were 4 supports at the 4 corners of each stand. The supports were of one piece with the stand, and on top of the stand there was a round band half of a cubit high, and on the top of the stand each stage and its panels were of one piece with it, and on the surface of each stage and on its panels he carved cherubim, rheons, and palm trees according to the space of each, with rails around. After this manner he made the 10 stands. All of them were cast alike, of the same measure and the same form. And he made 10 basins of bronze. Each basin held 40 bases. Each basin measured 4 cubits. And there was a basin for each of the 10 stands. And he set the stands 5 on the south side of the house, and 5 on the north side of the house. And he set the sea at the southeast corner of the house. Hiram also made the pots, the shovels, and the basins. So Hiram finished all the work that he did for King Solomon on the house of the Lord. The 2 pillars, the 2 bars of the capitals that were on the tops of the pillars, and the 2 lattice works to cover the 2 bars of the capitals that were on the tops of the pillars, and the 400 pomegranates for the 2 lattice works, 2 rows of pomegranates for each lattice work, to cover the 2 bars of the capitals that were on the pillars, the 10 stands and the 10 basins on the stands, and the 1 sea, and the 12 oxen underneath the sea. Now the pots, the shovels, and the basins, all these vessels in the house of the Lord, which Hiram made for King Solomon, were of burnished bronze. In the plain of the Jordan the king cast them, in the clay ground between Succoth and Zaretan. And Solomon wrapped all the vessels unweighed, because there were so many of them. The weight of the bronze was not ascertained. So Solomon made all the vessels that were in the house of the Lord, the golden altar, the golden table for the bread of the presence, the lampstands of pure gold, 5 on the south side and 5 on the north before the inner sanctuary, the flowers, the lamps, and the tongues of gold, the cups, snuffers, basins, dishes for incense, and fire pans of pure gold, and the sockets of gold, for the doors of innermost part of the house, the most holy place, and for the doors of the nave of the temple. Thus all the work that King Solomon did on the house of the Lord was finished, and Solomon brought in the things that David his father had dedicated, the silver, the gold, and the vessels, and stored them in the treasuries of the house of the Lord.